You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Tuesday 23rd of September 2014. Acting chairman claims BNP not to blame for latest troubles in Scotland. Now there's a boom in sham gay marriages. Gangs say it's easy to fool registrars reluctant to quiz same-sex couples. £2 billion wiped off Tesco's value as profits are understated by £250 million. Man charged with spitting at Muslim woman as she walked through Bristol's Cabot Circus. Over 4,000 Italian firms pushed out of market and immigrant buyouts surged 44% in the second quarter. Syria, US begins airstrikes on Islamic State targets. 8 civilians, including 3 kids, killed in US-led strikes on Syria. Monitor. A few simple words of wisdom from a Mississippi Delta boy I went to school with. Thought for the day, what price a reputation? And finally, all crumpled up. Welcome to our listeners on the 2 new days for World at 8, Tuesdays and Thursdays. When we have a personal interview with Nick Griffin, to accommodate him if necessary, we will send out a short news item on a relevant Friday. We are not catching up with the Nashonas until next Thursday, but we still have an interesting thought for today. Welcome. UK news. Acting chairman claims BNP not to blame for latest troubles in Scotland. The BNP website reports the British National Party, BNP, has been accused on some social network sites of being behind trouble in Scotland the day after the Scottish independence referendum brought victory for the Unionists. The site claims it had been alleged that the BNP had arranged 3 coaches to travel to Glasgow's George Square to incite violence against those who support an independent Scotland. It goes on to say the BNP is a democratic party and would not condone the use of any violence in Glasgow or elsewhere in Scotland during or after the referendum. World at 8. Apart from that, the BNP doesn't do demos anymore and doesn't organise very much, does it? Now there's a boom in sham gay marriages. Gangs say it's easy to fool registrars reluctant to quiz same-sex couples. Criminal gangs have started offering bogus same-sex marriages for £10,000 to get around immigration checks on sham weddings. They say it's easier for participants to fool officials by claiming to be gay, with one Romanian claiming his gang had fixed many sham same-sex marriages. Try and say that when you've had a mouthful. The man, identified as Ricardo, said he had never had any problems with the police or immigration officers. He added, "You say I'm gay, no more questions for you, easy for gay." Same-sex marriage was only introduced in England and Wales in March, and the criminals are taking advantage of registrars' lack of experience in dealing with gay couples. Senior registrars have admitted they find it more difficult to spot the signs that a homosexual relationship is not genuine. A heterosexual immigrant can gain the right to live and work in Britain by taking part in a sham wedding with someone of the same gender who has an EU passport. It's been estimated that 15,000 of the 173,000 civil marriages held each year in England and Wales may be bogus. But in urban areas the proportion of fake weddings could be far higher, perhaps as much as 1 in 3 in some places. World at 8. It wouldn't matter if this gay marriage thing had not been adopted, adapted and improved. It is yet another nail in the immigration coffin. Soon it will be as unmentionable and obligatory to be gay as it will be to be Muslim in the UK. Anything goes, just open season on heterosexual, white or could be Christian people only. £2 billion wiped off Tesco's value as profits are understated by £250 million. Shares in Tesco continue to fall despite early release of Alan Stewart. Tesco, the UK's biggest retailer, which surprised the market on Monday with its third profits warning after uncovering accounting problems, has announced that its new finance director, Alan Stewart, will work today 3 months earlier than expected. Mr Stewart, who has been finance director of Marks & Spencer's for the past 4 years, was to join on December the 1st but was released early following a personal appeal from Dave Lewis, the Tesco chief executive. The retailer has brought in Deloitte to lead an investigation into the serious issue found in Tesco's accounts for 6 months to August 23rd. Deloitte will work alongside its lawyers, Freshfields. Tesco has also delayed the publication of its interim results by 3 weeks to October the 23rd. Tesco shares, which fell 11 pence on Monday, continued to fall on Tuesday and at 8:08 were traded at a fresh 11-year low of 198 pence. World date, oh dear, I see horse meat and foreign crap becoming obligatory in Tesco's now, just to make more money for the shareholders. The poor farmers cannot suffer any more, so it'll be our turn. Told you, Soylent Green is coming. Man charged with spitting at Muslim woman as she walked through Bristol's Cabot Circus. Police had charged a 26-year-old man with spitting at a Muslim woman as she walked through Cabot Circus. Hasina Khan was on her way to work when she was allegedly attacked at about 9 AM on July the 21st. Miss Khan said she was spat on and verbally abused by a stranger who approached her as she walked through the shopping centre. Avon and Somerset police arrested Jack Hughes of Upton Road, Southville. He has now been charged with racially or religiously aggravated common assault and is due to appear before Bristol magistrates on November the 13th. Any witnesses to the incident who have not yet come forward should call PC Hannah King on 101, quoting crime reference number 74214/14. World at 8. Well, at least he didn't run her over and then proceed to carve her head off, did he? She's luckier than Lee Rigby, but then it wasn't filmed either, was it? Frankly, I couldn't give a damn. European news. Over 4,000 Italian firms pushed out of market and immigrant buyouts surged 44% in the second quarter. Bankruptcies amongst Italy's small and medium-sized businesses rose 14.3% in the second quarter this year compared to the same period in 2013 as the country slipped back into recession, according to figures released on Tuesday. A total of 4,241 businesses closed during the quarter, bringing the number of failed businesses in the first half of this year to 8,120. Data from the Milan-based research agency Surved showed. Italy's gross domestic product shrank 0.2% in the second quarter, dragging the Eurozone's third biggest economy back into recession. Gianandrea De Bernardis, the CEO of Surved, was quoted by ANSA as saying that the new recession, the third since 2008, was pushing companies out of the market that had successfully overcome the first phase of the crisis and are now paying the price both of the credit crunch and of demand that has been stagnant for too long. De Bernardis added that Italy's small and medium-sized businesses were going through a very delicate period. Meanwhile, the number of small businesses owned by immigrants surged 44% between April and June as they snapped up failed Italian firms at bargain prices, according to figures last week. A total of 325,000 small businesses in Italy are owned by non-Europeans. The figures from the Union Camera and Info Camera's Chambers of Commerce revealed. Indra Pereira, the chief of the Rome unit of the National Confederation of Artisans and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, CNA, told the Local that the entrepreneurs were able to take advantage of Italy's recession and buy shuttered businesses at low price. World at 8. She sounds like one of the entrepreneurs, that is, Asians and Africans buying up Italy the way they brought up the UK. World news. Syria, US begins airstrikes on Islamic State targets. The US and allies, said to include Arab nations, have launched the first airstrikes against Islamic State IS militants in Syria, the Pentagon says. Spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby said fighter and bomber jets and Tomahawk missiles were used in the attack. The strikes were expected as part of President Barack Obama's pledge to degrade and destroy IS, which has taken huge swathes of Syria and Iraq. The US has already launched 190 airstrikes in Iraq since August. However, Monday's action expands the campaign against the militant group across the borders into Syria. Rear Admiral Kirby confirmed the strike, saying US military and partner nation forces were undertaking military action in Syria but did not give details. The Syrian government has not formally consented to the airstrikes on its territory, however it says it was informed before they took place. US media reports said Bahrain, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were amongst those involved alongside the US. Jordan confirmed it had taken part but gave no details as to its role. Analysts say it's significant that countries with a Sunni majority such as Saudi Arabia appear to be amongst those supporting the US efforts against IS. IS members are jihadists who adhere to an extreme interpretation of Sunni Islam and consider themselves the only true believers. World at 8. Now let's get this clear. The West supported ISIS and its brothers in Egypt, Libya, Iraq and Syria, and is still ignoring their presence in Africa. I personally have more respect for the Taliban fighting in their own country against invaders than this ragtag and bobtail mess of European-born and offcuts of Islam killing their own for the sake of killing. But of course in modern times more have been killed under the flag of democracy, socialism and Islam than ever was under the Third Reich. 8 civilians, including 3 kids, killed in US-led strikes on Syria. 8 civilians, 3 of them children, have been killed in the US-led airstrikes on al-Qaeda-Nusra front positions, Reuters reported, citing Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. At least 30 militants died in the strikes, which were carried out on IS positions in Syria. The strikes targeted residential buildings in the Aleppo allegedly used by al-Nusra Front, according to Rami Abdul Rahman, who runs the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The US-led coalition's targets also included training camps, headquarters and weapons supplies in northern and eastern Syria, with many IS locations destroyed or damaged around the series of Raqqa, Deir el-Zor, Hasaka and the border town of Abu Kamal, Reuters reported. In particular, Islamic State fighters, training compounds, headquarters and command and control facilities, storage facilities, our finance centre, supply trucks and armed vehicles were hit. World at 8. I don't really care. A few simple words of wisdom from a Mississippi Delta boy I went to school with. This is from my husband. $500 million to fight ISIS or ISIL. Why not buy $50 worth of pork chops and grind them up and let Stan, fly as a crop duster, spray the whole place? They won't get their 72 virgins, so they can just go home and play checkers. World at 8, this is lovely, but pig's blood is better and spreads, especially if mixed with several thousand kilos of explosive devices. Like a charm. Thought for the day: what price a reputation? It defies imagination, seeing your children going off on an idyllic holiday to an exotic location and ending up, as they say in the deep south, dead. Now to the parents. What I am about to talk about is not directly related to their own offspring or relations, but of course does have some bearing on the murder of the 2 youngsters in Thailand. Now it has to be said that with all the financial benefits thrown at many of our youth nowadays, both by their relations and the establishment, it must be said that on looking back in time, as one is wont to do when fast approaching God, and the past looks better than the future, it must be said without prejudice that in my youth, unless one was wealthy, in the armed forces or on embassy duties, one's family did not go further than the south of France, if that far. I attended quite a few schools, convents and private, and I was usually with children of very wealthy folk who had the largest houses in those areas. Very rarely, if ever, did these children or teenagers go abroad either with their parents or alone. The usual watering holes, unless one had a family house abroad, were Bournemouth, Brighton and Hove, Cornwall or Devon. Places like Thailand, the Canary Islands, India, the Middle East and the Maldives and more were not especially well known apart from history books or geography. Travel had not become radicalised for the masses then, and I'm not sure it ever should have been. So in case you think I'm talking from a privileged viewpoint, I was not. My mother worked to send me to private schools, and I knew that although she provided a very good home and good addresses, I would not ever qualify for the landed gentry or enter the very wealthy Jewish set around me. But it isn't sour grapes. A long-lost relative came and found me, and I spent the last years of my youth before my marriage abroad and loving it. In fact, to be honest, I didn't want to come home to England and fought tooth and nail not to, but to no avail, but that is another story. So, far from decrying the fact that now many people who are still classed as working class or the poor still think that every year or 2-3 weeks they are entitled to travel to exotic places that their grandparents had never even heard of. It shows progress in some areas, but not, I'm afraid, in others. The term "you take your country with you when abroad" is an old one and now much maligned thanks to the Brit way of bringing everything open to the people to a new low on the international and public relations. When in Positano in the 60s, I noticed the southern Italians preferred the Germans to the Brits, and with good cause. The era of the travel packages had arrived, although still very expensive, and came from Thomas Cook, but the marketplace had just opened to the non-wealthy, and with it came the stupids. The whiners who wanted chips with everything and wondered why it was so bloody hot. The sight of burnt British flesh bouncing around, yelling at the top of their voices is something I can still see, as well as the expression on the faces of the local fishermen and shop owners. They thought it was all on candid camera. Of course the Germans spoke the language and were quiet and well-mannered, and they got the lovely pink tablecloths which diverted the sun's rays at breakfast time outside, and we got the awful bright white ones on which you could barely bear to look at the grudging breakfast presented through scrunched up eyeballs. So the era of colonialism had gone to be replaced by the British thought process of "I'm as good as them and so is my money brigade," culminating in entire areas of Spain, the Canaries and Greece looking like Blackpool undergoing the climate change. And when the Brits had finished converting the holiday spots near home, they started on the Middle East, the Far East and even further. Now, I don't hold any brief for these particular countries, but one has to realise that the culture is so different in these places from even the European cultures, and that the normal man in the street can barely spell these names, let alone appreciate the differences and know how to behave when arriving there. The media is partially to blame. Most films or TV programmes show faraway and exotic places as being the norm for Damien and co to go to, complete with the vast alcoholic intakes only known to the Brits and the capacity for sheer bad behaviour combined with public sexual activities. In my days before the wheel, I hear you utter, one did not go shopping or into town dressed in short shorts or bikinis or virtually nothing. You covered up off the beach or hotel swimming area. That was the done thing, home or abroad. Now, this didn't mean one didn't look good in those things, because believe me, females my age look bloody good and didn't have the alky weight blubber that floats around nowadays. It just meant parameters had been drawn and were observed. The old colonial thing of not going native still stuck. Now we have youths copulating on the ground in public in Greece and on beaches in Thailand. We have guys and gals without any brains in their heads smoking weed and taking drugs openly in many countries that forbid such things. We have vomiting, fighting and putting the natives in places they don't necessarily want to go. We have elderly white women going to African resorts just to have sex with young disease-ridden African pimps trying to get into the UK. We have old sex tourists going to Thailand for Thai brides or, what is nearer the mark, underage sex with either or both sexes. Also bear in mind that many of these countries have a very low living standard, and money is money, and most will sell their grandmothers for a price. In short, the Brit abroad is now synonymous with bad behaviour, drunkenness and sexual looseness, as well as an appalling taste in food and wine. Apart from being the laughing stock of the world with immigration, we are also the laughing stock when it comes to our youth and their upbringing, both educationally wise and standards. Why do you think that immigration has soared in the last 40 years? Because many of these people have seen the Brits in their own country and have thought of cashing in on the stupids, and they do. As soon as a Brit or British-born youngster is killed, arrested for drugs or drug trafficking, or for murder or being caught with underage kids, the cry goes up, poor British youth or girl, when in fact most have put themselves in the firing line and not come out of it well at all. It should be imperative that when abroad, respect the country you're going to. Don't take drugs in. Don't allow yourself to be used as a mule. Don't traffic natives back here. Don't marry them and don't get them pregnant. Don't use alcohol as if it flows free from the trees. It doesn't. And when drunk, you can or think you can do things you can't. Don't buy children even if the parents are happy with it, or you could end up like Gary Glitter. Don't get drunk and fall off the hotel balcony. Don't leave your very young children alone while you go out to drink, as you will only have yourself to blame if anything happens. Don't chase the local women or men. You don't know where they've been or what you could bring back. In fact, the good old colonial message should have been, don't behave badly as the natives will see. But of course I'm commenting on the end, one hopes, of the me I deserve it culture. That self-same culture which ignores one's elderly but continues to heap ill-afforded luxuries on youth. Now we have the bridal day, which costs thousands of pounds in absolute fripperies, and girls whose grandmothers scrub floors so the family could eat are thinking on whether to have doves or harpists at what are, in all but truth, a blue suit and brown shoes do. Go for it, girl, have the Philharmonic Orchestra while you're about it. It won't last. These are the people who now have prom day and a bunch of morons making money out of an even bigger bunch of morons who think they are suddenly American. Thus the corsage, the cars and the awful dresses. But it does the trick, doesn't it? Makes little Esmeralda think she's a lady by design if not birth. Now, in case you think I'm snobby, you may well be right, but it is this attitude of having it all at any cost because I'm worth it is the one we promote abroad at holiday times. It is this mindset which gives us hen parties in Bangkok and stag nights in Aberdeen, all expensive and all a complete waste of time. It also gives us the worst reputation in the world as foreigners abroad with the worst behaviour. We have replaced the much maligned colonial presence with its wait till you see the whites of their eyes brigade to the youths who can't even say that, let alone spell it. But they can, as sure as God made little green apples, find the nearest bar to fall out of several hours later. So not everyone who dies abroad deserves to die, but many have put themselves in the firing line with the locals and reaped that reward. Kids, just because they go abroad and are killed, are not saints. They didn't go there with their idea of converting or helping the heathen. They went there with their birth control pills and their Durex, their drugs and their propensity to drink, and to kid oneself or one's country that most of these people are more than a loss to their immediate families is to be sentimental. We do, however, have to face up to the fact that for the most part we have bred ourselves out of the breeding race through our children and their children, who with the best will in the world do not have the discipline or standards that most of my generation tried to adhere to, although most of us failed miserably. We didn't bring down a country's reputation whilst doing so. At least 3 generations of British kids are lost now and unable to make lives for themselves because of the nanny Marxist state we've allowed to corrupt them. It is our fault entirely. We have equated money and possessions with time and affection. And this is the result. And finally, all crumpled up. With a very seductive voice, the woman asked her husband, "Have you seen $20 all crumpled up?" "No," said her husband. She gave him a sexy little smile, unbuttoned the top 3 or 4 buttons of her blouse, and slowly reached down into the cleavage created by a soft, silky push-up bra and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He took the crumpled $20 bill from her and smiled approvingly. She then asked him, "Have you seen $50 all crumpled up?" "Oh no, I haven't," he said with an anxious tone in his voice. She gave him another sexy little smile, pulled up her skirt and seductively reached into her tight sheer panties and pulled out a crumpled $50 bill. He took the crumpled $50 bill and started breathing a little quicker with anticipation. "Now," she said, "have you ever seen $50,000 all crumpled up?" He said no, trying to hide his arousal. She said, "Go check the garage." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.